Okay, so now the phrase punking guests.
That's apparently what we're doing now. Hello and welcome to Game of Nodes, a weekly podcast on the Cosmos from independent validator teams. And we have the lovely voiced Greg Asuri with us today, despite his complaints to the contrary. Thank you for humoring us, Greg. We're going to be talking about, well, funnily enough, we're going to be talking about Akash today. Actually, first question, Greg, to kick us off, warm us up. Is it Akash or Akash?
Akash.
It's Akash. Oh. Okay. And what is there a deeper meaning behind the name?
Of course. Akash means the sky in Sanskrit, or the ether, the first element in Sanskrit.
That is interesting.
Since clouds are formed in the sky, and since Akash is a cloud or a marketplace or a meeting point for clouds, the name was derived from there, essentially.
As soon as you pronounced it Ash, I was like, he's going to say Sanskrit, and many of my ancestors are going to roll over in their graves. So thank you for that. I now feel very embarrassed. Okay. So this week, obviously, we've got Greg. We're going to talk quite a bit about Akash. But to kick us off at the top of the show, we're going to do some regular follow-ups, basically rolling off of stuff we had last week. And the three topics I've got on here are Docksgate, Brontide, and Prop 2021. I want to go with Brontide first because that is the most personally exciting. So, Usurper, you have some thoughts on this excellent band?
Well, I think I've been kind of falling based on some of your recommendations and kind of where Spotify's taking me and everything else. Brontide has been showing up more and more on my pretty excellent prog/metal playlists here, and that's the number of great kind of bands coming out of the UK that have a lifespan of less than 3 to 5 years but produce amazing albums, and then those members go do something else and produce other amazing albums. It's very 2000-y type of thing where you don't have nobody's just playing for 40 years just to try to knock it out. It seems like there's a lot more jumping around from bed to bed, if you will. And maybe that's just creatively just trying to find the right thing, or maybe that is, they just understand it's not going to happen or something else, but it sure produces a great amount of music and very diverse music too.
Fun fact, I think the bassist from that band went on to, I think is now the bassist in Rolo Tomasi, if you, kind of more of a metalcore type of vibe, but there is a lot of moving around and all these sorts of different projects. When you're programming hot new features for Akash, Greg, what kind of music do you listen to?
Boy, my favorite programming music is probably Eagles of Death Metal. I mean, they're not death metal band. It's called Eagles of Death Metal.
Yeah.
Or BMRC or Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Something that's just like jing 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 on the background.
It's a quite raunchy kind of sort of almost down back to basics kind of bluesy rock and roll, right?
Blues rock and roll is usually my go-to, but something that gets away in the background and doesn't take my focus away to the words, right? Like, when I'm listening to music at least 10 hours a day, I'm plugged in all the time when I'm coding, especially when I'm coding, right? Like, what about yours?
I think we've got over our taste quite a bit on the show previously, but this is obviously why we're talking about music as a regular thing. But I think Serp and I are kind of more of a progressive rock kind of vibe a lot of the time. Schultzy, I think, is into mainly achingly cool stuff, right?
Yeah, something like that, more melodic type music.
Yeah. And then I feel like Niall's a stealth metalhead. He keeps very quiet. But...
Yeah, I like metal and trance. I like a bit of trance while I'm like bashing on the keyboard. Stuff that I can't understand any words to. Because then it's non-distracting.
I actually went and saw Dvorak's New World Symphony over the weekend, which is like, it's got some Nutcracker in there. It's got all sorts of nonsense with the organ symphony. So that was a great time.
That's cool.
It might
That's so wholesome. I can't believe you just went to see like classical music.
I also listen to classical music. I've got like a 101 Symphony album that I just like put on in the car and when I'm working sometimes. I reckon it's great, Schultzy.
It is. Not to age myself, but I'm a big Rachmaninoff and Mozart fan too. I don't know. I think those are not that far from these other type of genres we're talking about. I know it seems like there's a big divide between some of that stuff and trance and those types of things. It's not that much of a divide, actually, if you can get into the right.
It's percussion, isn't it? Like that. I think that's the big, like having kind of like a really specific backbeat is like very uncommon in classical music. And if you cannot live without that, like for example, like it's quite common that thing of what people saying like ambient music is like not that far away from like string sort of classical, maybe that is very sort of based on a large string section moving at a slowish pace, you know, obviously not like Sturm and Drang or something where it's very dramatic and with brass and whatnot, but you know, the snare drum only comes along as an instrument in the orchestra in the Romantic period, right? So please, musicologists, tell me
that one. I don't know.
I mean, I can only go as far as back to like violin of like the 1600s. After that, I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, dude, I don't know the history of it. I just enjoy the sound of it. All right.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm just saying that like the best classical music is the Succession intro, where it is a dissonant string section with a tritone in it and a hip hop beat. That is like S tier. If classical music had a hip hop beat, it would be S tier in my opinion.
If classical wasn't classical.
The best part of any show is probably the tune-up for me. When you get to hear everything start to come in and harmonize, that's the best. Put some punk in there. No. Harmonization, the best.
That's beautiful. Okay, so I managed to successfully completely derail what should have been like a 1 minute. How are we doing? Sorry about that. So do we want to talk very, very briefly about what's going on with Prop 20, Prop 21? So we've just done a Prop 20 upgrade on Juno, and there is a slight little problem with it, isn't there?
Not with the prop. Well, the upgrade went swimmingly well, right? It sounds like that in the contracts as were tested and everything else associated with the prop, and the software upgrade was I had Cosmovisor running. I actually forgot about it until it was over. I just got notified just with the pause, but then I assume that Prop 21, you said there is something that was found, or at least something that needs to be updated.
Yeah, so there's a basically a small problem in the IBC handler, which we've actually been running until now without noticing. But essentially, if you want to update an IBC channel via Gov, at the moment you can't on Juno. We've never had to do it before, which is why we didn't notice that there was a bug. There's like a line of code that needs changing. So I think that's in Prop 21, the upgrade, and also crucially the funds need moving from a it's basically like I think it's more of it's either a fat finger or a miscommunication, essentially, that the funds were moved to a null address and then were supposed to be moved to the smart contract, but instead they were just moved to the null address, which was not what we did in testing. So there was a little bit of a disconnect between what we ran on the test net and then what actually ran on mainnet in terms of like each one of the steps. So now the second half needs to happen where it just gets moved over, where after being unstaked and moved, it gets moved over to smart contract. But I didn't really have any involvement in that part, so it was a surprise to me as well, because I didn't write or work on any of the code for the actual the move side of things. So I obviously saw it tested because, you know, we're helping out with the test nets and whatnot, and helped out with the smart contract, but because it obviously worked in the test nets, it was like, okay, cool, well, you guys who are working on that bit, you seem to have it under control, whatever. And then today, like, I was also away from keyboard when the upgrade happened, and it worked, whatever, got back, and it was like, oh, hey guys, what? And I'm like, yeah, what's happening? So yeah, it's gonna be an upgrade in a couple of days. Not really a big deal. I think that's kind of the end of that. Actually, you know, as another, since we're doing follow-ups and tie-ups from last week that have come back around as well, something we were talking about on last week's episode, Greg, was that the upgrade model of Cosmos, I think, has gotten a lot of attention recently because of the variety of chains of upgrades and halts, etc., that have been happening, and we sort of had like quite a long conversation on whether or not it was some fundamental property of the way Cosmos works, or whether it's just that these chains are now scaling in sophistication and user base, and it's sort of correlation rather than causation, just that there are a lot of chains moving very fast now. So naturally sometimes there are going to be issues, they get stuck, the teams do some work, unstick them, and it's not really anything to worry about.
So what's the question?
So the question is, do you think it's like correlation or causation, or do you think there's some fundamental thing about Cosmos that means these problems sort of are bubbling up now, or do you think it's just noise because we're moving quickly?
I think it's lack of coordination. I mean, it's hard to say, right? Like, so we had an issue with the upgrade module recently. We upgraded the chain, and that was a disaster. I feel like and it was also like, well, we didn't include the upgrade model in a test net, so we weren't able to test the upgrade module. Assuming that upgrades are going to just be smooth, and assuming that's just going to work out of the box, because that's the least sort of like critical piece of the whole mainnet upgrade. But that didn't end up to be true, and it was just a holy hell of like pushing out a patch, waiting for people to come online. The validators, our biggest validators, dropped, and then people were out of sync, so I had to resync, and it's a whole nasty sort of like remediation process, right? So I think it's just, I think that people are moving quite fast, and there are different use cases I think are not being tested properly. The testnets, the idea of testnets have sort of like gone out of fashion. Some of them do it, but in the testnets, there's no guarantee that if the code passes through the testnet, it's going to actually like work, right? With the kind of speed people are moving at. So I think there needs to be a Cosmos collective for testing these like modules. I don't know if there is one, or if Ignite team is fully like plugged in to what's going on in the ecosystem. And also, like, it's wrong for us to actually expect Ignite team to be the responsible parties, right? So things are moving way faster than the core team Cosmos members can keep up with. I think that's what's causing all these issues, right? Like,
Greg, that was a SDK issue or a WASM issue? I forget what the
SDK
issue, right?
Upgrade module is supposed to introduce Cosmos Visor, and supposedly the ideal scenario is when you vote on a proposal and agree on what block you're going to upgrade, it'll automatically do the upgrade. Supposedly, that was a promise, but in reality, is like, well, there was some null pointer exception, some memory, like some nasty thing,
right?
And I don't know why we assume it's going to work. I mean, that just gives you the importance of actually having to test the actual binary you're gonna, or the commit hash you're going to like upgrade on, and not assuming that this commit hash is gonna, or this version is going to work, right? Like low hang. And I think Juno also had the problem, or even MMOS had the same problem, right? Like,
both Juno and Evmos have had halts recently. Juno was a cyber attack. Evmos was with Serp, Schultzy, Null, you guys.
That was an upgrade snafu.
Basically,
during the upgrade, there was we didn't get consensus straight away, and then there was a lot of node resetting and losing state files. So then basically,
was it validator error then?
It was just it was a communal like error, I guess you would say. Like, there was a lot of people telling people to do things that they shouldn't be doing, and
I love that part.
But the impetus on that was, I think there was a WASM, there was a a 0 day. It was some sort of 0 day WASM type. Dylan could probably keep me going, but there was some issue that was kind of forcing an emergency upgrade, and then that emergency upgrade turned into a mix of bad communication, and then there were spreadsheets and trying to make sure we had the consensus on it, and then there was a version switch at the last minute, which is always a bad thing, right? Like somebody
but that
sets
was
it up and
during.
waits.
That was it last minute or during trying to get consensus? I can't remember.
During, I think it was during while you're trying to get consensus. That's right. Yeah, it was some.
Yeah, and so they did a bin switch, and then and then consent. It just the binaries were just confused as shit, and then
Right.
everyone was trying different things to make it work, and people were telling people to do stuff they shouldn't do, and then a bunch of nodes got double signed, big ones as well. So they just had to stop the network basically.
What happened to the double signers? Did they lose money?
No, because they wound back to the block before the doubles. So when they restarted the network, they did like a state migration and then wound back a block.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, the rollback.
Yeah,
That's the most useless rollback ever. But anyway, it rolls back one block.
Rollback one block. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just that one block that they were trying to, get going. So it was I think it was pretty much just it picked up where the original upgrade was supposed to pick up.
That's right.
Right. So so the upgrade module leads to the consensus failures. And we've seen that happen quite a bit. And worst scenario is if you have a big validator that was, that has a state that's out of sync, and they just keep like printing blocks, and everyone else is like out of like consensus, right? So you're gonna have these like crazy scenarios that you have to re-coordinate, and the big validator has to like resync their state to a trust group that's much smaller. But also like we're learning quite a bit. Like we're learning the importance of like better distribution, right? Like because one of the reasons why Akash upgrade took about 16-18 hours, and we were up all the time. And the big reason was we had one of our biggest validators didn't show up on time, or at least they showed up on time. They actually did what they're supposed to do, but they weren't present for us to be able to debug and like coordinate. And Overclock Labs, the company that builds Akash Network, the core contributors, we don't have enough voting power to influence a vote in the thing. So it's decentralized launches are extremely hard and especially highly risky when you have validators with a lot of voting power.
Yeah.
Right. So,
I mean, we've had to spend a lot of time on Juno, especially given the cadence of the many upgrades that have happened in the last 2 months. What with the cyber attack, what with the 3 security patches that we've had for CosmWasm, plus the fact that we've had routine stuff going on as well that we've been trying to get through. What we've had to do is basically there is a coordination channel where we say we have there's now a releases procedure in the GitHub repo. So even if people that don't really want to engage with, I suppose the Juno team, if you like, they know where they can get those updates. And then we've also had to be like, well, from a security perspective, we can't reveal everything publicly all the time anymore.
Right.
So some of the validators who sort of were relying on us just tweeting all the information and them just like knocking it out, we've had to say, well, look, the problem is we can't do that because there's a security risk. So we kind of need to know, if not exactly who you are, you don't have to dox yourself. We do need to have a place to contact you. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Or at least it's not. I mean, well, it will work, but the first notification you're going to get of an upgrade is when everybody else stops, upgrades a new app hash.
Right.
That was one of my main concerns with upgrade or Cosmos Prop 69, the CosmWasm upgrade, because I was like, well, for Juno, we've had a couple of like shadow upgrades, right? And that's gone well because many of the validators are pretty plugged in. However, with Cosmos, those upgrades tend to take quite a bit longer because it seems like those validators aren't quite as engaged. So if there is a security breach or a hotfix that needs to come out now, are we going to be able to react as quickly? That was one of my main concerns. But we're ultimately voting yes anyway.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the addition of CosmWasm to the hub.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I think in Juno, we're a little bit more lucky in that we don't have as many corporate validators in Juno. So it's like a little bit more accessible to the actual people who are running the nodes.
I think the other things as well. I mean, with Manita, we did two test nets pre-launch, and then pre-Manita we had the mainline test net, which got killed by us cyber attacking it, me and Ben, X4, and then we had to restart it, didn't we? Because we killed it, and so any validator that was a part of those test nets had like the experience of like chain halt and restart with COS and WASM and all of the like, oh, now you need to shuffle the WASM folder and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously to get then the final upgrade out, we did like, what was it, 4 test nets in 3 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think the uni
means that there's like a core of validators there who really know their stuff and like can help other validators when stuff goes wrong. I mean, and to be honest, like sometimes there's things that when I'm tired, I screw up and I'll literally ask. And one of those validators that was a part of that Astarte set will literally be like, DM me and like,
right,
dude, here's what you need to do. Don't worry about it. And you're like, this is why these guys are great. This is all these guys are so good.
We have a pretty high participation in uni, like in terms of number of validators from the mainnet set. There's quite a few in our testnet, which is good.
Yeah,
running. So
the whole upgrade is a bonding process for sure.
That's a good way of putting it.
It's amazing. Like most people forget how important validators are for supporting these networks, and really, I mean, I love Akash validators. It's just amazing to see how supportive, especially the small guys are. Right, like the big guys don't really care as much as the small guys do. So it makes you really reevaluate your delegations, and we're going to do a whole revamp of our own foundation delegations to people that actually added support and were critical when we needed them. But boy, it's been such a bonding experience, and also such a learning experience, and a reminder to thank your validators. You should have a validator day.
Well,
thank you, validator day.
National holiday.
Every day is validator day for us, man.
Thank you, validator.
Well, that was part of the reason to actually talk about Game of Nodes was that the independent validators, I think, sometimes get overlooked, or you have, everybody. And I think there's a pretty large blind spot in terms of delegators knowing how to pick validators, what's important, and then they're all ranked, right? So when you see 1 to 10 out of 125, people, oh, I'm safe, right? That's what you see. And there's that idea around decentralization and some of these errors that we were talking about, issues we were talking about in terms of involvement and buy-in and those types of things. Like somebody in that top 10, I know, like maybe an exchange wallet or something similar, that doesn't have, they're not involved the way, the Fray is, or King Nodes is, or Lavender 5 is, right? But again, that's difficult you really have to, it takes some time to really build the marketing and the branding around that for people to understand what's the difference there. So I think that whole idea around proof of stake, that is a real misconception, I think, in terms of delegators, in terms of what's important.
Do you think Usurper, the difficulty there is, I mean, I certainly from like my capacity and our capacity as a small validator company is like, I mean, maybe as well because we do DApp development and we have other projects, but like we can basically support 2 chains to like a meaningful, like we're more engaged than the average,
right?
And more than that, we have to be just another validator in the pack, even though we're an independent validator, and we rely on, like, to the extent this is why we've only run 3 chains, and the 3rd chain we run is a meme chain because it's a way for us to test stuff out in production to some extent, right? But it's quite, I mean, so Greg, we've looked at joining the Akash set because it's a really interesting project, right?
Yes.
But I kind of feel like it's the amount of work that I do other than just validating personally, and that we try and do as a company for the chains that we work on. Like I already feel like I don't do nearly as much for Stargaze, say, than we did before they launched. Like when they were doing their testnets and stuff, we tried to be because those folks are all in the US, we tried to be helping out in the European time zone and doing all that kind of stuff, and chipping in where we could and whatnot. And I feel like because the amount of work in Juno is quite big, and we're quite involved over there, like that's meant that we can't be as involved over here. And so then I look at other chains like yours, really interesting project, seem very involved validator set. We're, for some DApp development stuff we're doing, we're looking to move stuff long term into like DAOs running their own infrastructure on Akash, and all that's really, really interesting to us. But we're also just like, well, if we can't make a meaningful contribution outside of just validating, and we try and buy our way into the set and maybe knock somebody out who we don't know maybe is really helping out in that area,
right?
What are we adding? Should we even be in that validator set? Probably not, right?
I mean, folks that are adding value on Akash will get delegations. I'm very active in the Discords, in the Twitters, and especially in the upgrades. I was there for the whole 16 to 18 hours, right? So I know what validators added value and the validators that don't add value, right? So if I see a validator getting knocked out of the active set, a validator that I feel like should not be knocked out, I'm going to give my personal or I'm going to propose our foundation to give delegation, right? So it's a very much proof of stake is very much not very much like contextual, conditional. There's no rule book, right? Like, but if there is someone who just has a lot of money, I mean, we have some validators who just bought their way in. They don't do anything. They're not going to get my personal love and foundation delegation, right? So I mean, there's no right way to do it. And of course, we want our validators to be hyper involved, but buying tokens and holding on to those tokens is also contributing to the security of the network, right? So they're not like useless. They are contributing to the security network. But delegations are one way to keep the validators in the active set without having to buy the tokens, right? And I think that should be more natural. We want to see that because the value of contribution is much higher than value of capital, right? So, and we are also increasing our validator set, right? We do I think the proposals every 3 to 4 months to increase the validator set, right? I mean, you got to keep in mind, the bigger the validator set, the slower and the larger the chain gets,
right?
But there are always trade-offs. But we feel like if the minimum required to be in the active set is not reasonable, there's somebody in our community, and most of these proposals don't come from us. Somebody in our community will put a proposal, and we'll happily support it in whatever way we can, right? And then you have like Ethereum and like these other chains. You have thousands of validators, and I wonder how upgrades, if there is anything of such in Ethereum, is going to happen in the proof of stake network, right? Very curious about networks that have enormous amounts of nodes, right?
Right.
I guess Ethereum, you don't really have to worry too much because I think it's the leader finance folks that control like 50% of the nodes or some crazy number like that. So you just need to go to one, and the whole notion of like Ethereum is more decentralized because it has more nodes is just ridiculous, right? Because one company controls a lot of these nodes.
Yeah.
But I guess, in a really true scenario where you have thousands of nodes and truly distributed, I wonder how upgrades happen, especially when you have to do security patches, really rapid security patches, right?
Yeah. So I wonder if there's like a model like I'm trying to remember the name of the protocol. Am I thinking of Holochain? Yeah, I am thinking of Holochain. I think where the sort of the data, the validation integrity of the blocks, if you like, are kind of pushed to app level, aren't they? So I don't know exactly what their upgrade model is, but I presume as most clients are obviously not keeping full state, it's more of a BitTorrent model where it's just more about current version of protocol for two things that want to actually sort of be clients in the network. So there's probably a bunch of quite interesting different ways of cutting this problem. But I wonder if, like, the more fundamental thing that's maybe relevant for Cosmos is, should we be tying upgrades to the concept of governance, right? Because there are situations in which a software upgrade might be conscientious, and we've certainly seen that in Juno, right? That's definitely happened over the last 10 weeks. But for like the two that we've had, Prop 20 is funny because it's controversial. Prop 21 is literally a like, oh, minor bug, let's knock out a release. In a kind of, if you worked in industry and done continuous deployment or continuous delivery, you would literally hit the button the second time and go, oops. And then it would be out 5 minutes later, right?
Yeah,
and it wouldn't be a thing. And so there is like there is an interesting question, I suppose, given that we're seeing that governance in Cosmos is coming up against challenges, whether or not there will be changes in that direction. Like, are there types of so something that I think Demi on the core team for Juno was talking about, and I think Jack was talking about maybe on the podcast a while ago, was like whether we should be having 2-speed governance for software upgrades. Like, you can say emergency is like 1 day, regular is like 5 day, and quorum is maybe different for those two. But then, people try and sneak through things on the one that they shouldn't on the. So it comes back to this, like, how trustless are we, and do we have to trust our validators? And I think the answer is, and I've been shitposting about this on Twitter for some time now, is that in my opinion, proof of stake is actually just a distributed system. It's not, for some definition of decentralized. It's a distributed system with multiple operators who don't necessarily trust each other. But in practice, they actually have to. So in practice, you've got 100 operators rather than one operator, and that's only like one order of magnitude different, right?
So it's a good question. I think the term trustless is fundamentally stupid. You trust something at the end, be it at the cell level, be it at whatever level, there is something that you're trusting. Even if you're running a Bitcoin node, you're still trusting the CPU is going to act. So you're still trusting the clock is going to be good, right? You're trusting something. I think decentralization is about removing attack vectors, right? When you consider about chain halting or double spending or verification, right? Things of that nature. But it's not removing trust entirely. You can't. How like you gotta trust. Look at the access point. Let's talk about Kepler, right? You gotta trust that Kepler you're installing on your computer is valid and verified by someone else. Right? You're trusting Google at that point, right? Where you can't use a decentralized network without some level of trust, right? The only question is how much of trust do we require, right? So something like chain upgrades, right? Like, I mean, you're trusting validators to do the necessary diligence and review the code. Like, I don't know if you guys do review the code, but most of them don't, right? Review the code. And literally like act on behalf of the people, right? And you have to coordinate. You have to learn who other validators. So I think there's no truly, even as a Bitcoin, like this is an upgrade for Bitcoin. You're still trusting the core team that they are acting on behalf of the other people. Not everybody's reading. My grandma has Bitcoin. She's not reading code. It's like,
is she running the client?
For her. Yeah.
She's not even running the client, right? Like, she's just trusting somebody to run the client for her, right? But that trust is inherently not dangerous because, her trust in the client doesn't mean is removing the trust from the network. Trust minimize is a better word than trust less. Mm-hmm. The minimal trust you need the lower friction that you get to interact between two parties in that particular network. Right? The lower friction you have, the higher the scalability you have for a system. right? So Bitcoin or decentralized systems remove or lower the friction of interaction between two parties for whatever reason, be it conduct commerce, Akash, do deployments, and Juno actually run smart contracts and whatnot, right? You don't need a high degree of trust from the other party in order to function, right? And that's what makes decentralized systems fascinating, right?
Yeah.
So put whatever term on it, right? Ultimately, everything is a distributed system. Ultimately, right? The only difference is how much trust you need to participate or run the network.
Yeah.
And when it comes to I feel that upgrades should be frictionless. The actual process of upgrading from one version to another, migrating the data, I think that process should be frictionless. But what goes in the upgrade should not be frictionless. Right? That should be on debate. Right? This is absolutely needed. But after we come to a consensus, what goes into the upgrade, I think from there on it should be completely frictionless. And then, all that means is we should be able to ship upgrades when we need, and have enough time for the community to come to consensus, right?
Yeah.
And
Well, if it's the code that matters, then you can look at it a different way, which is maybe back to the, like I said, not an expert in holochain, but I gather there are some similarities between their model and the BitTorrent model. Maybe we should be looking at a thing where, dirty secret, most validators don't run an archive node. Most validators prune aggressively, especially on large chains, especially on smart contract chains.
If you're part of a chain upgrade, you know what I mean. What the difference between a prune or a full node is. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of things here where you go, okay, well, actually, a lot of the complexities of managing that upgrade are to do with the state and the validity of the state changes effectively, and whether or not it's consensus breaking and what the next block off the upgrade is going to do. But keeping almost no state on the client would sort of make that whole process a lot easier. But then you kind of get back into the, well, okay, so where does system integrity come from? And that's like, okay, so if we've got lots of peer-to-peer nodes that are just going to interact with each other, where's the archive of state? And then we've designed a new system that's not quite what we're currently working with, right? So it's, I don't know, to me this is all very, as a kind of like systems designer, I think this is all quite interesting.
A state DAO, which keeps the state archives, an archive DAO or something that keeps archives of all the states and verified and whatnot.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think you're semi joking about that. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I mean, like, there is an argument for doing something that is stateless with more of like a cell towers model, where your archive nodes are effectively your cell towers going like, yep, no, you've just asked me about data integrity, and I can tell you the hash that you've just given me is the one that the majority of nodes or a subgraph of nodes have given me, and that seems reasonable. It's all about fast finality. At the end of the day, it boils down to how fast you need your finality, right?
Right. Someone had this idea. It's actually a good friend of mine, Dan Lynch. He's an up and coming Cosmos star. He's actually doing a lot of work for Osmosis now. But he had an idea for I forgot what it was called, but the idea was like, we have a big challenge is bootstrapping and discovering RPC nodes and discovering state. Right? Bootstrapping in general is a huge problem, right? Bootstrapping a chain or a client, as a matter of fact. And how do you know? Well, first question you got to ask is, how do you know what you're getting is real or not? Right? How do you trust that RPC server? But the only way to do that is like run it by yourself from the code, compile it, yada. And I assume that GitHub is the official source code, and it's not, it doesn't have any exploits or not trying to steal your money, right? So you're trusting GitHub again here, and you're trusting that the canonical source code, and you're trusting GitHub actually verified the authors are right. Anyway, the I think we need to do much better, right? We need to do much better without GitHub involved necessarily, right? And we need to do much better with bootstrapping. And a DAO idea seemed to be very, very attractive, especially a DAO that is where the members are effectively validators, right? Because they are most connected with managing multiple, managing or validating multiple chains. If they all come together and have some sort of like, decentralized way to sign off on these packages, or bless the packages, or bless the state and host the state, and get some fees for it, or something. It's not a bad idea, actually, if you think about it. It could be a chain by itself. It could be a DAO on Juno.
I think somebody's trying to build a Git chain in Cosmos, right?
Yeah.
I think Polkachoo sent round a thing. Polkachoo is an excellent validator, by the way. I'm not sure if they validate Akash, but one of
the name pop up here and there.
Yeah, one of the absolute best. They were talking to us the other day about I forget the name of it, but there's a chain launching in the Cosmos, sort of with some Git integration and hooks, and I think they want to do some of that stuff in the future. Whether or not it will pan out exactly as intended, I don't know. So, some specific questions on Akash. I keep saying Akash just because I'm pronouncing it the English way. Akash. I know, showing them whatever. Anyway, culturally white, unfortunately. So, for those that maybe are less familiar with Akash, what drove you to start it, and what was like your original vision?
So, a bit of a backstory. I've been a programmer for a little over 25 years, and I founded a company called AngelHack. AngelHack is the largest hackathon accelerator in the world, hackathon-based accelerator. But it was really, we introduced hackathons to the world. Hackathons before AngelHack were a very underground concept, and I helped launch several developer tooling companies. I mean, my primary focus over the last, I would say, 10 years, have been building and shipping developer tooling. And one of the biggest company I helped launch was Firebase. Firebase became, absolute darling in developer tooling, and got acquired by Google. And so my passion was always developing tools that are hyperscalable without the friction. Because a lot of times you have distributed systems with hyperscalability, but they're extremely hard to use, and vice versa, right? Systems that are super simple are not very scalable, right? So the idea was, how do you really create infrastructure that's easy to use at the same time, easy to scale, right? It's still a problem till date. And and I stumbled, this is 2013, right, 2 years into AngelHack. I really wanted to solve the deployment problem, right? Like, so deploying something from your workstation to the cloud was extremely, difficult, especially if you're under duress at a hackathon, right? It's easy to do that on a Heroku, or now you have Network Find version or whatnot, but those systems generally can't scale, right? Heroku literally wouldn't scale. They'll just ask you to go somewhere else. And if you try to use Amazon, I mean, it's just a nightmare, right? And you have to do Chef or a Puppet or one of these nasty things, which are very unpleasant to use tools. And so I discovered this thing called containers, and I fell in love with them. And I was and containers back then, this is right before Docker came along, made containers really simple. And I was working on how do you make these containers more fault tolerant. And then I discovered Kubernetes in 2014. This is way before Kubernetes. It's right, very, very early. And spoke at the first Kubernetes conference and whatnot. I started contributing to the project quite a bit, and found a company, Overclock Labs, to take Kubernetes to market. And I love Kubernetes because it was, the Docker containers in general would solve the parity problem. You build once, you test it, and you can take that container and deploy it on a server. And you don't have to worry about dependencies, right? Which is most of the time most of the time where the issues happen. And back then, mutable infrastructure was a thing. I wanted to build immutable infrastructure, right? So containers solve a lot of these problems. Kubernetes solved the orchestration and fault tolerance problems. That's where I saw the light to build a truly scalable, easy to use infrastructure. And Kubernetes, mind you, was not easy. I guess it's still not easy to use, but it was horrible back then. I mean, had no documentation. It was very, very early days. And we built Overclock Labs to take Kubernetes market, but also and do so in a product that was high performance, edge capable scheduling. Right, so you could literally use Overclock Labs product to schedule to turn any data center, mostly bare metal data centers, into cloud enabled products. Right, so and federate them, so you can literally create this beautiful layer and that you can deploy to, let's say, 10 different regions in like 3 minutes or 4 minutes, using all running Kubernetes. And Kubernetes didn't have multi-cloud coordination capability, so we wrote the control plane for the multi-cloud to make Kubernetes multi-cloud in 2015, and it worked amazingly well. So that got me to talk at the Kubernetes conference and whatnot. I met a lot of incredible people. A lot of that code I wrote for that became Helm, and Helm came around way later, and they used a lot of the code I wrote to do these deployments, right? To do this, package management style deployments. And when we were deploying this, we discovered most compute sitting in these data centers we're deploying to was unused. The number was somewhere like 90% of the compute was not used, right? So, and well, then it becomes very obvious to create a marketplace to unlock this compute and make it available. And this is, mind you, high performance compute. It's data centers with bare metal storage, right? So, and bare metal is a lot more efficient than the hypervisor in terms of like resource allocation. And it's a lot more faster because you don't have the double kernel problem. You're going directly to the box, right? Mm-hmm. All the good stuff, and from a security standpoint, all the good stuff. So when we decided to really build a marketplace, we wanted to make sure it's open because we're open source people. We've been working on open source. We didn't want to create a closed source sort of like company. And a big problem with open source is, well, it's not sustainable, right, as a business. And how do you really create a network or a product that can self-sustain itself? And we were also, like, being an edge-enabled product, we had to create a sort of like centralized system, right? Because I'm a big fan of optimistic schedulers. And a big thing about optimistic schedules versus pessimistic schedulers is pessimistic schedulers need a control plane that controls the nodes, whereas optimistic is self propagating, right? Mm-hmm. It's slower, but it actually is more.
I'll put my hand up and say I didn't fully grasp what's going on. Why does the optimistic scheduler need a centralized router?
So a optimistic scheduler would try to optimistically schedule and then fail, and then fail till it succeeds, and doesn't require a lock. And a lock has to be stored. Why? Because when you need a lock, that means the lock has to be maintained by a system, and that system could go down, like in pessimistic schedulers. So we wanted a lockless system, right? That's where the optimistic scheduler design really shines. And we kind of built a optimistic scheduler at Overclock that was amazing for scheduling edge nodes, right? So, and these nodes would like self-coordinate without a central control plane in a peer-to-peer manner. And they would use, it was etcd, that was the most popular data structure, data store. And we kind of wrote like a BitTorrent style replication mechanism. So we kind of had like a quasi blockchain and a Merkle tree, integrity checks, right? Like, so we kind of had like a quasi blockchain without even realizing we built blockchains. This is in 2016 timeframe, and then we were like, well, we had a blockchain without our tokens in a permission blockchain, right? And then we realized, well, we might actually bite the bullet and go full blockchain instead of passive.
I think leads us on to the next kind of question area that we kind of had for you, which was like, so it sounds like the original vision was very, very strictly kind of going in this direction you're already going with Docker and Kubernetes and whatnot. And it's like, okay, well, but how can we make this sustainable? So it's a combination of the economic model and the fact that you're already building a blockchain. So then the next question we were going to kind of ask about, your involvement in the Cosmos, which is what made you build on Cosmos in the first place, and like what technical benefits did that bring, and what challenges?
Mm-hmm. So the decision was like, well, when we want to do this, do we do a L1 or do we do an Ethereum? Because Ethereum was the only chain. We actually prototyping the Ethereum on Ethereum. CryptoKitties launched and crashed our chain, and we're like, well, this is not going to work, right? Ethereum, like CryptoKitties, literally took down the chain if you remember that, for a while. Mm-hmm. And we were not even able to do anything, and we decided to go L1. And the question was to build our own chain from scratch, or if we can find some help to do that quicker. And then somebody introduced me to Jaquan, and this is 2018, early days in 2018. And they were like, hey, there's this library called Tendermint people are building, which does the consensus for you. And everything else you build on top of it. And we liked it because, number one, it was Golang, right? It's easy for us to go pick it up. And we were looking at the development on Tendermint. It had a high cadence on GitHub, was very important to us. And number three, and the fact that it's Golang gave us confidence that we can actually go build on something that's incomplete and actually, contribute and build together if you have to. And the consistent model was
for those at the back. Tendermint is Golang, the Cosmos SDK is Golang, Docker and a lot of the tooling around Docker, containerization, Kubernetes, these large scale, maybe inverted commas, enterprise software suites for doing orchestration on a massive scale at like data center level. A lot of these tools are written in Golang. So obviously that Greg's already talked about his background in that area. So that's why when you see the kind of Go light bulb go on there, that's
so
why.
I've been doing Go since 2014, officially full-time Go. If you look at my GitHub, you'll see a lot of history. I've contributed. My libraries are used by Kubernetes. I was early contributor at Terraform. Docker, just that era of 2013, 2014 infrastructure software. That's my background, right? Go is very comfortable for us. So we try to pick a language or a framework, usually in the language that we're comfortable with, so we can actually make contributions. And Tendermint wasn't stable for a long time, and it didn't have the modules, so we ended up writing all the modules ourselves. And then Cosmos SDK came in 2019, I think. Or Cosmos SDK was developing parallelly to our project, and then we drew apart, right? Because we had our own module we were developing. We didn't really, Cosmos SDK was not ready, so we ended up and a lot of the modules we wrote, of course, in a small team, we're not going to be able to have the same level of contributions the core Ignite team did. And in end of 2019, we decided to bite the bullet and switch to Cosmos SDK and throw away a lot of our code. I remember Adam, my co-founder, did this passive PR somewhere in the GitHubs, but we deleted like 80,000 lines of code, 90,000 lines of code. Like we wrote, because that was the kind of like, it was amazing because it's like deleting code. I love deleting code. Like deleting code means less attack surface.
You were really exchanging code more than deleting, right?
Exchanging code to something that's more reviewed, more peer reviewed, that's ideally more stable, ideally more maintained, right? Like so, quote unquote, well maintained.
Right.
But there's always we write the least amount of code as possible. That's my policy, right? Although we end up writing a lot of code. We have this saying that, hey, months of coding can save hours of planning.
Yeah.
But anyway, you want to write less code, and SDK significantly reduced our amount of code that we need to write. And now it's a thriving ecosystem. It's amazing to see the modules they're developing, and we wrote a few more modules we contributed to and whatnot. So it's a long-winded history as to how we started and why we went down this rabbit hole. And believe me, when we're doing Cosmos, there are not too many teams that are doing Cosmos. Very few, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it was one of the first projects, right? I would assume in terms of larger projects that came off the hub.
Yeah, we're the first IBC chain, right? Like, I mean, after the hub, obviously. We're the first IBC chain. So when Osmosis launched, they launched with Akash as the first token, besides Osmo and Ion. Like pool number 3 and pool number 4 is Akash, right? Sunny is also a good friend, but yeah, being early in the ecosystem, you could get a lot of help from the Cosmos OGs. Sunny was very, very helpful, and we wrote. I read almost every paper of Cosmos, and a lot of the economics were influenced by Sunny's work, and Jack was very helpful. Jack worked for Akash for like 6 months, I believe, helped us really, get in there. And it's fun to be early because you get access to all these amazing people, working on the team for even like, what's the name? Most founder, Fede worked for like a few weeks at Akash as well. So we had a lot of like Cosmos OGs working at Akash at some point.
So they have like the biggest knowledge base, right, for the thing because they wrote it. So
yeah, right. You probably have the best knowledge base.
Right. So that's the history of Akash. Where do you see the project going? In like 5 years. Like, what's your kind of vision now?
Before we get into that, the fray, I sort of have an interim question between those two, and that is, you recently upgraded, and I didn't go into the test net, and I'm not a validator on the Akash mainnet. I was an insider but I resigned from that somewhat lately because I just not being a mainnet validator there. I don't really have the additional time to put to that. But my question is, so it was a major upgrade, this one, I believe, and I'm just curious as to what feature upgrades there was, like what additional functionality did this upgrade bring, or was it just more of a background upgrade?
No, this added storage. So for context, cloud being able to compete or having complementary or having feature match with Amazon is a long game, right? You're not, when Akash launched, we didn't plan on having all the features Amazon has on day one, right? It's a long roadmap for us to get there to even match all the features. So initially, when we launched the Akash platform about a year ago, we wanted to perfect the container orchestration, ephemeral container orchestration. Because once you add state to it, you have a second variable that is extremely hard to debug, to stabilize and whatnot. So we want to keep the feature set small enough so that our teams can have focus, and we have less things to worry about and less things to validate. So we put up a plan saying that, well, we're going to do ephemeral containers without state. Then we're going to do state. Then we're going to add compute capabilities, GPUs and bandwidth and whatnot. Then that'll give us a foundation to actually build a real cloud on top of it, the true serverless cloud, the way we're going, right? What a true serverless cloud will look like essentially is, writing serverless code, be it no code, and being able to literally orchestrate across different services that are, offered to you in an open market and in a competitive manner, and an ecosystem where there are a lot of players and benefiting from each other, right? The idea is to remove a need for a centralized gatekeeper to all these technologies. Today, if you want access to any good technology, I mean, you got to be on the cloud, right? So where we are going is first solve the fundamentals, and then we get into the actual services, right? I want to be able to get Postgres, manage Postgres on Akash, right? And I would want that Postgres to come from the creators of Postgres, not from Amazon. because
Yeah.
Amazon is literally
Right.
taking
Yeah.
Postgres, white labeling it, and adding a premium.
Right.
Right. The creators don't make any money. Right. The people that contribute to the network don't make any money. So our goal, the vision of Akash, is to change that. So this mainnet 3 is essentially the first step in us upgrading capabilities and adding elastic storage, essentially, right?
Mhm.
Right.
Storage. So now we have unbounded storage. You can attach how much ever that provider is capable of providing you in terms of storage. There is no limit, and this is network attached storage. Now you have NVMe storage, you have all kinds of high performance storage that you can get access to, and we are seeing a lot of activity from Chia project. Chia is one of these really good projects that is storage heavy. Essentially, the consensus algorithm is storage based.
Mhm.
So for them, they can get specialized storage on the current cloud today. They're able to come to Akash and get that high performance storage. They want something like 1 million IOPS or something like that, right? So Akash is opening up, and the future, if you look at what's happening with Mighty, which is an app that started by Suhail, who's a known founder. A lot of new technology, and for Mighty, they need their own data centers because they can't get the performance on the current cloud. So the way Akash is going, and Akash want to be in a position to serve these new founders with specialized requirements. So they should be able to put an RFP and be like, hey, anyone that can provide this, this kind of capacity, talk to me. I'll get you come to Akash, and I'll be able to consume you in a peer-to-peer manner, right? So the really the goal of Akash is to open up the market to anybody and anyone that's capable of serving or providing compute to anyone that's capable of consuming compute. And serving compute is not a complicated thing, right? Running a data center is not as complicated as writing software. I mean, it is being commoditized.
That's a pretty hot take.
I mean, it's got a lot of work. I mean, writing software is a lot more heavier than maintaining, or changing your disks, literally. Like the 8.4 million data centers in the world, right?
Yeah.
And again, the modern software is designed to be fault tolerant. It's designed to be interrupt tolerant. Right? It should be if it's not.
Yeah,
when you have
it's really interesting to hear you talk about sort of serverless technologies and that kind of on-demand compute element, because obviously, so pre coming to work in crypto, a lot of what I did as an independent consultant and we did as a company was trying to get enterprise size companies to ditch running metal, and if they weren't in the cloud, move into the cloud, and if they were already in the cloud, move to serverless. And if sometimes jumping the whole way from bare metal to serverless, right? Because fundamentally for most kind of consumer grade applications where it's e-commerce or some kind of thing that can be served headlessly, some kind of content website, some other bits and bobs, maybe a Next.js site, maybe some React or Gatsby or whichever front end it is. It's not particularly heavyweight, and the API requirements on it aren't particularly heavyweight, and you don't need lots of big heavy servers sitting around to serve a few web requests with a TypeScript API. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so serverless is a great paradigm for that, because even on AWS you can have 80 serverless functions in a test environment, a prod environment, and have like quite significant traffic and pay like $200 a month. I've been in that scenario where we had a large team sort of running this project, and people were like, oh, what is this going to cost us? What is this going to cost us? And I was like, look, I guarantee you our monthly cost for the serverless function invocation is going to be less than 1 day of one developer's time. And I was right by a good margin as well. But you look at that and you go, well, hang on. Like you said earlier, there's a lot of unused compute sitting around. What if you can take that model of on-demand pay per microsecond or whatever it is that AWS and Google do, for their on-demand compute for serverless functions, and then also be spending at the rate of unserved, effectively, compute? It could get an order of magnitude cheaper, right? And for somebody that's kind of like a serverless advocate, where I'm like, I only really want to pay for what I'm using, and I think that that's what people should do, and it's an obvious place to have a market. That's I think a really exciting idea. Like if you can get it to that level of granularity, right?
That's where we're going. That's where that's the direction we're heading towards, right? And I think like once there's so much opportunity and so many problems right now to solve. I mean, just before we can get to this true no code serverless, just write a function and run it, plug in a low latency environment, run all that stuff. We need to solve bandwidth. We need to solve storage. We need to solve high performance compute, HPC computing, like with GPUs and whatnot, right? Unless we can solve these problems in a highly distributed and decentralized way, then we're going to see the true benefits of a serverless come to fruition, right? Like today in the pricing, cloud has this coarse-grained pricing model, which results in partial usage waste, right? So like you pay essentially 1 hour. 1 hour is a minimum, right? And get a standard tiered model, not in the serverless pricing. I'm talking about traditional instance pricing, on-demand pricing. You get these tiers you pick from, and you have this time slots you pay with, right? And that's a coarse-grained pricing model. And we all know, so the suboptimal for running anything like a function, right? And the pricing is not, and most of the time, and not most of the, all the time, the requirements for a function vary. It's not going to be like 16 gigs of memory. It's going to be probably like, I don't know, 12.1 gigs of memory. Right?
Yeah, right.
It's so fine-grained, and it's very important for the future of the cloud to have a fine-grained model. And Akash provides you a fine-grained model. Provided it becomes very challenging, how do you price this on the back end? And a lot of the work we're doing right now is like, how do you optimize, your profit and loss with providers, right? But so we have taken fundamentally solid primitives with pricing, solid primitives with distributed design that will bake into, that'll come of relevance once we have the serverless working, because serverless will translate directly one-to-one down to the instant pricing with our fine-grained model. And then you're going to see a lot cheaper serverless function. Serverless is not affordable today on the cloud, right? Yeah, it's okay if you're running something for a lower scale, but try to scale that up, and it's just scary. Some of these bills are, especially on Amazon. Right?
Yeah, the Fred knows about that.
It's scary. Right?
Well,
the moment you hit scale, I mean, I'm talking about like.
I mean, I think my validator bills or our validator bills as a company are because we are running on AWS. It's the environment that we're most familiar with. Are substantially more expensive than a large scale serverless deployment with Aurora RDS in 3 AZs fully backed up. Talking deployments where everything's terraformed, everything's automated, do maybe a minute, 2 minutes tops of DB ops per year, that kind of level of automation. And that's that entire setup, I think, even on a per month, per year basis, was probably, RDS was the only thing that was particularly expensive in that model. Our serverless execution, like I say, we were paying under $400 a month, but we very heavily optimized and very, very heavily knew what the billing pattern was. So, for example, it's an open secret, obviously, on AWS that you get more. I can't remember which slider you get, whether it's for the CPU or for the RAM. But if you maxed it out, it gives you more virtual cores, so it makes it go quicker depending on what language you're using.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better to bash the slider all the way, and it actually executes quicker and costs you less. So we kind of obviously optimize. We tried a few different settings to work out which one was the best one. So, I mean, you're right there. There's obviously an angle for optimization, right? But yeah, it's exciting to think of like how much more accessible that could get, and especially, again, how much better the tooling could get around it. So we're at about an hour and 10, which is when we usually start thinking about putting the fray to bed, given our time zone here. So we've had a couple of questions for you, Greg, which I'd like to pick up on before we start wrapping up.
I have a lot more questions.
Yes, I was going to do the viewer. Do you want to do the viewer ones now?
It's only 10.
Did we put those in the spreadsheet? But in any case, so Todd is, and this is a brief answer to this one, I know. Todd has asked if Akash has a container registry.
There is one in the works called Open Registry. It's funded by the Akash Foundation, or the CAB, actually, Community Awards Board. It's ready to go or very, very close to completion. And the idea is to have the open registry, and it's Akash optimized, running on Akash. So to use that as the official container registry for Akash. And right now we had to still depend on the Docker Hub or any or whatever container registry that's external to Akash. But yes, there is one in the works, and it's almost complete.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. Because I think at the moment, like most people, just use GitHub Container Registry and Docker Hub, right? So one thing that I know that people have been asking for a long time is HTTPS capability. So I think most people at the moment just use Cloudflare to proxy to the servers. So is that something that is sort of on the back burner because of the workaround with Cloudflare, or is that something that's actively being worked on?
It's on the roadmap. It's actually being worked on right now.
Is it like something that's is there much higher priorities than that, or is that like one of the high priorities?
It's I think scheduled for either next quarter, if I had to refresh my memory, but it's a priority. But it's definitely on the lower side of priority because people use Cloudflare, and Cloudflare gives you a lot more functionality beyond just HTTPS, right? It gives you DDoS protection, which is a pretty helpful feature. But it introduces centralization, right? So we are aware of what's going on. But yeah, it's in the works. Hopefully that'll be ready in another 3 months. But we do have GPUs as a top tier priority, right? And when you're talking about like running validators, Akash costs 90% cheaper now than Amazon, roughly, for the high-end boxes, right? 80 to 90% cheaper.
That's
and
crazy.
There's also something called Omnibus, Cosmos Omnibus, that gives you a lot of fault tolerance scripts and whatnot. Mind you, Akash is a very, very self-hosted model and doesn't have all the bells and whistles that you get with Amazon, especially fault tolerance and like auto scaling and whatnot. So you have to end up writing a lot of these things yourself. So like if you want autoscaler, you monitor on chain. If you monitor performance, if it goes offline, maybe even have a smart contract in Juno that'll do it. So there is still a lot of work that that needs to be done to host, but the advantage you get is like a very fine-grained pricing model that's 80% cheaper. And soon enough, we're going to talking about Juno. We're going to in the next upgrade, which is much sooner, within the next month at least, we're going to enable interchain accounts. So with that, you'll be able to use your Juno account to deploy directly on Akash. You don't need an Akash wallet, and that Juno account will own the deployment. It's great when you have a DAO, right? Because DAO can own the web app or whatever you're using. If you want a Matrix server with Element frontend, to have your own Slack that's completely sovereign to you and fully decentralized that you own completely, right? And you don't want to deal with a credit card or put it on Amazon. You can use your Juno account, fund the deployment using your Juno account directly on Akash.
We're actually waiting for that functionality. So there's a project that I'm working on with some other very smart people called Howl, which because of my pronunciation, HOWL, Howl.
Okay.
Howl, not HAL 9000, which is what a lot of people think. But it's sort of governed by a main DAO, and that DAO is the goal. We're kind of hoping that feature will be ready for us to sort of kick the tires of it to get the Howl DAO. Howl DAO with the Howl to actually host itself on Akash, if you like, and pay for its own hosting out of its development fund, because it's only the main front end is only sort of React, It's not a hugely expensive service to run. So if we can work out a way of putting on Akash, it's going to cost even less, and it can sort of pay for itself and support itself. And that is kind of really interesting to us as an idea of making the actual separating out the running of the service from the development of it. It's maybe all the way back to what we were talking about with the validator set and core teams and how much trust you have. As soon as you give the community the ability, or the DAO the ability to run its own code, it can kind of turn around and say, well, we don't like the direction the developers have taken. Might take it a different direction, actually, lads. And okay, maybe we're rugging ourselves by looking at doing that, but I think it's like an interesting, development of how you can do things, right?
Yeah, it's great, right? I mean, like it's yeah. I mean, I think that should be the way to go. I mean, your member should control your code, and what goes on in that should be voted upon using governance.
That's yeah, I think that's really exciting, and I hope that the DAO tooling advances to a point where you can make deployments through voting. That'll be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that's being discussed right now. There's a PR somewhere with DAO. But I think interchange accounts is part of the IBC 3.1. Is it, or I don't remember correctly, but
yeah. So it has to go. I think from Juno's point of view, the interchain accounts is dependent on an upstream. It going into fix going into WASM. Sorry, not WASM. WASM. So X WASM, the COSM WASM module. But I think that's going to happen pretty soon. Like I gather Ethan and Simon were talking about it. So it is soon, TM.
So Greg, you did mention Cosmos Omnibus, which is mostly maintained, I think, by Tom.
Tom Bayon.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Everyone, make sure you delegate to him certainly on Akash and the other chains. And he's lately been contributing a lot and starting up validators, but he's been working on Cosmos Omnibus for a very long time, and I don't know how he keeps so much of that up to date. He's all over most chains, and there's a couple of other contributors in there as well.
But I vote for Omnibus becoming a DAO. I think Omnibus has a sort of like the best scenario because they maintain the snapshots, they maintain the code, they maintain the scalability and fault tolerance scripts. They maintain all that. I think that should be that could be a good source of truth.
So I think one of the problems, a DAO would be awesome. Are you saying they're already maintaining snapshots?
They are.
Okay, that's awesome. That's
snapshots
a new development.
on like Storage or something that you can download.
I know that the storage was always a problem there. So now that there's persistent storage now, right? Then that might be bode a lot better now for management of those nodes. I'm not sure if there's an integration there yet, but certainly
there's also a discussion to run. So I think we're using either Storage or for your archives, Storage or Saya. There's even a discussion to run a local gateway servers in local Akash providers. We're running the gateway servers for these storage network, so your download speeds are going to be really low. I mean, high download speeds and
so historically the keys were kept on S3, but these days I think leaning towards you can still use that same
snapshot.
The same like the same code base, I think, with Cosmos Omnibus, with very little variation to that, to actually use like a soft sign from an external server like TMKMS, which sort of eliminates your key storage issues for that, which I think is worth a look. But one other question I had outside of that was it's quite difficult to manage your deployment in terms of updating it. So one thing that we do at the moment is on Juno, we've deployed the junonetwork.io website on Akash. And every time, so it's quite fluid, that website, in updates for the ecosystem page where various projects add their information, and then we update the container and then update a cache. So there's no way that I know of at the moment on a cache, and I'm no a cache guru, to have a system where you can automatically update from a GitHub commit to update your instance. So basically now at the moment, the way I've got it set up is if you make a commit, or when you tag, the same as on Cosmos Omnibus, it will create a new container, and then you have to manually go and like redeploy the instance.
Yeah.
Has anyone worked on like some sort of update from commit
Yeah.
situation for React apps?
We do that internally for Akash. For Akash website, we actually have a Git action that'll handle the whole workflow for you. We don't even touch the deployments, but we're going to open source that very cool. I mean, there's some amount of cleanup that's happening, and we'll Git enable deployments onto Akash. There are two sets of tools that you'll be looking at. One is a build time, another one is deploy time, right? So the build time is building the container, and deploy time is taking the container and deploying it. So for build time, if you have a Docker file, great, use a Docker file for your build. If not, we can use something called buildpacks.io. These are literally Heroku build packs that are community managed, and that are amazing. It gives you Heroku-like capability, like get push, like it handles all the dependencies and all that good stuff, right, for you. So if you have a fresh project that you haven't built a Docker container yet, and building a container is a nightmare, buildpacks is a great way to do it. And I have lots of examples in Awesome Akash on how to use those buildpacks. And during the deploy time, using a GitHub action to take your container and or you can use a GitHub action to even invoke the build phase as well. But effectively taking the container, creating an SDL file around the container with that particular version, updating it completely on the background using GitHub Actions. We have that, and we'll open source that very soon to alleviate a lot of these issues, because updating, I agree 100% with you. It's a pain in the ass.
That's exciting to me. I'm not sure if any of these other guys are actually like working with the cache deployments, but that really excites me, because that's one of my biggest issues with using a cache is if you have a lot of deployments, keeping them up to date with, especially when you work with like a sort of decentralized team like we do on Juno. If they go and you either have to set up an alert that someone's tagged something new, or go in and look at the commits and see what they've done, and then tag something new when you think it's far enough along, and then go and do the update, which I use a Cachealytics, which makes it a lot easier than using CLI. Yeah, Cachealytics is awesome.
And we're also working collaboration features, right? So a lot of new features that are coming in, authentication using Akash login, essentially, an effective login mechanism. That'll open up collaboration, right? So you can effectively build apps on top of Akash. Using Akash as an identity provider, and you can add collaboration, and you can have an external state on top of Akash, something similar to Terraform, where you can have metadata for applications, right? Like metadata is important because it's very hard to identify applications right now. Like you just get a big long string, and challenge of decentralized systems is this user experience is just going to be like so decentralized native that you have to rethink on how these applications work. And I'll be making an announcement very soon about our new head of product. He was leading Terraform at HashiCorp, right? So bringing a lot of former cloud people, into the mix, people that actually built Terraform. One of the beautiful things about Terraform I liked was it's a great automation, but I hated was state synchronization. I believe they have like cloud state synchronization now, but back in the day we used to manually ship the state if you want to collaborate, right? But anyway, I think the cloud product has done quite a bit, and we're going to take a lot of lessons from the Terraform cloud to add collaboration. Great for in a fully decentralized way, right? Great for like teams that are collaborating across the pond. and whatnot, right? I mean, there's a lot of just like deployment side of things from a user experience side of things that we're focusing heavily on while we build the capabilities, right, on the side. So our latest hires are all like focused on making the product super simple. I hate to use the command line. It's just like it's so there are so many steps right now. There are like literally 14 steps to deploy something on Akash.
Yeah, if you do it manually, it's a lot of work to and then maintain it as well, and you have to keep a lot of information to be able to, maintain your deployments.
The metadata is hard. So I literally have like a make file that I had on my command center, and the make file also has this gigantic state file so my make files look like it's embarrassing to open source my make files because they're just a crime right now. Like it uses a flat file system to do metadata and whatnot. But we learned a lot, and it was important for us to not work on workflows and really focus on like functionality and stabilizing functionality because if we dictate a workflow, then we limit ourselves in terms of creativity people come up with, right? Like Akash Lytics wouldn't exist if we made deployment super simple, right? And turns out Akash Lytics actually has done a phenomenal job, much better job than what we could with almost no resources, right? And that's the kind of like commitment we want people to have towards building Akash. And now they're actually doing really well, and we learned a lot from them, right, as to how to deploy. And we're hiring people to make things simpler, but simplicity, removing friction is a large part of our work right now. Even with a new command line that we'll be coming up with, a deploy command line that's outside of the actual, a command line that has opinions, right? Opinionated command line, because to simplify things, you got to opinionate.
Yeah. Well, that's all pretty exciting, and so it sounds like you're still, there's a long roadmap, and we're moving through it. I think it's gonna, as things get easier and more inclusive in features, I think the take up of users will come along with it. Once I think, for a lot of people, I think once it becomes just easy to use, it'll become prolific if people can just here's the thing, click, here's the GitHub repo, click the button, it's done, it's up, and we want 5 instances with a load balancer, and you just go do all over, red over it.
And and a good command line experience. I think good command line experience is so integral to attract high quality developers. Web UI is great, but I think Web UI for me, especially, it's a secondary, an extension, right? I use Web UI to get a bigger picture, but I prefer command line always because
Web UI requires a certain amount of centralization as well in the workflow. So
web or some GUI, like Akash Lytics is a GUI, right? But
it's you download it to your thing. It's not dependent on some web server somewhere. It's like a local. There's not a web deployment of that, is it?
It's a web-based, it's an Electron app, basically.
Okay, right.
But the point is a GUI, right? Forget that.
Yeah,
a GUI is definitely a complementary, right? You'll be able to do, I think you should be able to do things very quickly using command line, and you got to use a GUI if you need to see a bigger or compare things, right? Like logs, for example. I'm a big grep person, right? I want my greps, I want my filtering capabilities right on the command line, right? But if I do want to share the logs, I should be able to do that using a GUI, right? Or if I want to collaborate with other people, I want to be able to use GUI. Maybe I just want to deploy once and just click a button, I want to use a GUI, but things like that, right? But if I want to do anything advanced, I'd rather prefer a command line. A good command line, because it's part of the workflow, right? Like you're developing. I use Vim, my workflow. I use Vim to write code, and I should be able to exit that Vim or stay in that context and deploy immediately from that Vim, right? Go to a website and open that, because that's a whole different experience and a whole different context you're switching.
Well, it sounds like your hire from Terraform is in the same similar mindset, right? Terraform absolutely follows that same type of structure where
Command line first.
command line first, and then GUI. There is some GUI to be able to support that, and there's some third-party tools that help support that. But that command line, straightforward, reusable, right?
And I love HashiCorp tool in general. The
Yeah.
way like Mish Hashimoto, the founder, had a lot of influence in my way of designing command lines, right? Like Akash command line is a crime because we literally took the Cosmos SDK modules because it gives you all these like Cobra modules that you just plug in,
Right.
and you get all this functionality. So we didn't want to like mess with that. So we couldn't do anything beyond that we want to see in the command line. So, but a command line we're building right now from scratch that doesn't inherit the SDK functions, but essentially is designed to do deployments only and not anything else. The other ancillary functionality that you get with your chain management and whatnot, right? So deployment first, a very HashiCorp inspired, look and feel or experience. We're hiring people from HashiCorp to even help us to do this stuff, right? So,
Yep.
But also, if you know any good command line developers, they're very, very hard to find, by the way. Like, they're like almost UX people for the command line, if you know anybody out there that's good at command line, please come talk to me. I love command line. Look at my GitHub. Personally, any repository that I have over 1,000 stars is all command line work. So I've written, and also Mish Hashimoto uses my command line libraries, which I take with which is my biggest flex. So because I consider him to be the master of command lines, right? So I love command lines, and I will support your command line, aspirations. Like if you want to design a kick-ass command line, come talk to me. Right. So yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for indulging me in my questions. I guess now we should let the Fray wrap up. He's probably getting very, very late over there now.
It is now very late here. So yeah, we always do a round robin on the final question, Greg, just to wrap up, which is, what are you most excited about this week in the Cosmos coming up?
Well, I've been so ingrained in like Akash testnet. This week, we have quite a few new providers coming out in Akash, all providing persistent storage, and we are having Thorchain validator on Akash. It'll be the first real big validator. Thorchain only has 21 validators, and they've been very kind enough to delegate foundation delegations to running on Akash, because, as you know, a lot of the Thorchain nodes are run on AWS and GCP, which they're not happy about, and they're getting a lot of flack from the community. So I'll be working on, it's my first Thorchain, first validator I'll be running in production. Myself, a lot of people run validators on Akash, and all the proceeds that we get from validating Thorchain, we go back to the community. So we'll probably put that on a community pool, and the community decide if they want the tokens to be distributed to themselves or burned or whatever. So it'll be a fully community run, running on Akash, a very publicly run validator, and see how that happens. So I'll be joining the validator set, I suppose.
Nice.
Awesome. The Fray?
Exciting. Your Prop 21, I suppose. That's the most exciting.
Is it
More upgrades?
Upgrades, right?
More getting up at 3 a.m.
It's most something. I'm not sure exciting is it, but
I feel like I'm so disconnected these days from community at large and what's exciting, what's not, especially the mainnet and the upgrades and all these crazy things happening in Akash.
I think being like such an integral part of a big project sort of limits your scope to what you can pay attention to.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, the Fray. What are you thinking, mate?
I'm most excited about getting my taxes done. It's like five days or something beyond the end of the tax year, and everybody involved is going, "Hey, man, where are the spreadsheets?" and saying, "Hey, there's been 10 weeks of drama, and I am I am also the company bookkeeper, and we're 3 months behind. Nobody buys that. They say, well, get it done. So I'm looking forward to that being done so I can get back to writing some code. That would be pretty cool.
I had mine done 2 weeks ago. April 18th is our deadline here, right?
Yeah, April 30th here. So yeah, I mean, to be fair, they don't have to be filed for ages. It's just that your accountants, as soon as they crack it out, then their job's done. Then they can invoice you, and you're done. So
I know, right? Just invoice me.
yeah,
Right. I know, right?
especially in our case because the crypto is so complicated. They're basically like, you provide us the spreadsheets, then we will work it out. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure the harder bit is the bit that we're doing, not the bit that you're doing. But nevertheless. I'm looking forward to getting that out of the way. There's quite a few exciting test nets coming up, actually, which the defund one, which is like a ETF ETF in the Cosmos space, I think is really interesting. I'd like
airdropping to Akash holders, I hear.
defund.
Oh yeah.
Holders.
Nice.
So I'm quite interested in getting involved in that test net, maybe if I have time. And there's there's one other that I think a couple of the other folks on this call there's one other interesting project that I saw this week and was like, well, that's kind of. Oh, also Quicksilver is, I think, test that started the Quicksilver. That's quite exciting. And back to your point about Tom from EcoStake being a great person, the Cosmos Interchain UK meetup, he's talking at the one in June, as is Joe from Quicksilver. So nice little
very good
there as well. Cool guy, cool project. Which one am I talking about? Could be both.
Talking about meetups, I go and hack with Juno folks quite a bit here in San Francisco.
Yeah, because you know me out.
Right, I hack here and there, but every Saturday they come together at a cafe, and then they hack together. It felt very pure.
Would that be? Are you talking about like Jake and Noah and Zeke?
Jake, I only saw Jake, and Dan Lynch is a good friend, and Dan and Jake, and there are a bunch of other people. I mean, I saw like 10 to 15 people, all building cool things. I used to do that quite a lot in 2010, 2011 timeframe during my Angel Hack days, and like the Mission coffee shop hacking on a is a very pure endeavor. I think we're actually opening our office here, a big one, hopefully in the area, in the Mission area. It's pretty much the same thing. The idea is to invite Cosmos, contributors or Cosmos, anything. If you're working in a Cosmos ecosystem, doesn't matter what project, you should be able to come and hack with us. So I'm going to make it a thing, and I'm going to make it very accessible to ecosystem projects.
Need some hot offices for us bloody validator plebs when we're getting around.
If you're in San Francisco, if you're a validator, you can use our office.
Is there a cot in the back, maybe? Yeah.
So I think like offices are sort of becoming back in vogue now, right? After the
it's fun to hack with people. Really fun to hack with people.
So something interesting that the DAO guys do is that they just sometimes jump into like the Discord stream, and it's not organized or anything. It's just a couple of them will want to work on something, and they just jump in there and stream it publicly. You can go in there and watch what they're doing and chat to them, and it's a really fun experience for me. Anyway, I'm not like a massive coder, and I learn a lot every time I go in there, and those guys are always willing to help me understand what they're doing, which is kind of cool. Probably counterproductive for them.
I don't know if I can code while streaming. I mean,
it's whether you can talk
collaborating anyway. Sorry.
It's whether you can talk at the same time, right? It's kind of like the whole pair programming thing. Like I find, I've literally will not take a job if they say pair programming. You got to do it. I'm like,
it's sometimes fun. I'll give you that. Actually, pair programming, especially if your peers are at the same level as you, it's not fun when your peer is not at the same level, either higher level or lower level. But if you're the same level in terms of experience, seniority, it's a lot of fun because you're like actually exchanging ideas, and and like one person's researching, another person's coding, or you switch it up. It's actually a lot of fun. I got a lot of work done that way. It used to be a thing back in the day, but it used to be a religion back in the day. I hated that, but I like pairing with like my peers. But
now
yeah,
it's all mob programming, which is just another escalation of this stupidity, in my opinion. But that's I've given enough hot takes today. I should.
Well, in this instance, they were working in like UIs, so I guess they were just talking about how it looks and then just changing stuff and talking about how it looks, and changing stuff and talking about how it looks, like iterating.
It's like voluntary pairing or mobbing, isn't it? Like, I mean, I think the problem is that if you work in the industry and you do this stuff long enough, anything that people spontaneously do because they have a couple of people who they know and trust and they like and they want to do work in that way, they'll work that way and be incredibly productive because you can't replicate that experience of working with people you like and trust and respect and work well with in the way that you want to work with them. And then people see that and they go, the thing that must be good about that is that there were 4 people on the stream, not, they're motivated to build this thing because it's a lot more interesting than building another fucking web shop or whatever it is you do for a big company, right? And so they go, right, thou shalt work in 4s. And if you're a developer, and particularly like, so my background is functional programming, so I am already a spiky character on some teams because my design patterns, the way I do stuff, the way I think about problems is very different and opinionated. And also because I've quite often been like a lead or whatever as well. So I can be a little bit like, have you thought about this? And maybe we're going to do it this way.
Use common Lisp.
I mean, yeah, but as you can see from my name on the thing, I am actually a Lisper and I've spent the most of my career in this. So, but that said, like you end up in this situation where you're like, okay, well, you don't want to. The reason that the solution that you come up with here might be better is actually because of the clarity of your thinking. It's not because of like working in a 4 or whatever. And again, like it can be quite difficult to communicate other than with a working solution why an approach is better. Like a really good example of this would be things like elimination of intermediate collections if you're using map, iteration, and reduce. So if you're used to functional programming, you have the idea that you and Rust has this, so relevant smart contracts, is that you have lazy evaluation, right? So just like this idea ended up in Apache Spark, right? It's the foundation of modern data processing, which is that you lay out everything you want to happen, and it doesn't happen until you fold.
Right.
And you do like a right fold or a left fold or whatever, but like a reduction operation or an action or a collect or, however your language does this, and there's a whole bunch of different ways you can approach any given problem. And it's quite hard sometimes to communicate though. I don't know, whatever.
I agree with, I totally know what you mean. Like totally know. Like when you're doing stuff like that, you get so ingrained into that. The map reduce is like two, especially with functional, you're multiple levels deep. And you're like 5 levels deep, it's hard to talk and hard to explain, right?
Right. I think that's exactly it, isn't it? It's like whether you can stream and talk and also communicate with somebody else when you're filling your idea space with these things. And I think I think, the philosophy of programming languages, some programming languages are geared towards lone wolf programming. Because they give you much more expressivity, much more terseness at the expense of being less readable. I mean, nobody's going to argue Haskell is more readable than Go, right? But you can probably write a 40,000 line Go program in like
40 lines or something.
Yeah, like 40 lines of Haskell in some cases. Like, I mean, if you like PureScript as an example, where if you see like a React application written in PureScript, it can be tiny by comparison to the React equivalent. And ClojureScript has that property as well. You can have a multiple less lines than you would in JavaScript.
Right.
But it comes at the cost of these languages they have extra inherent complexity because you have all these additional language structures like Juxt and whatever that are just quite alien.
Like writing calculus.
Right.
Sorry, I was going to say something.
House Coffee is a place that.
Yeah, I was going to say. I think Callum is one of the gents who frequents horse Hoss
Hoss
Coffee
Coffee.
from the Dow guys. Sorry, that was a bit of an interruption.
It's a really cool group. If you're in San Francisco, I highly recommend you're hacking with them.
Sorry, the Fray, did you have any more to add, or
I should not be adding any more to, any more fuel to the functional programming fire or the what's it called fire, the pair programming fire. So I'm going to shut up and
yeah, because I mean, you say you're tired and then talk for like literally an hour by yourself.
Always late in the show. It turns extremely technical from the Fray, right? Like start getting to some real.
It's like a symptom of him being tired. Is
I think it is. Like all the filters go off. I just start talking code. Like if we let you go, you just start speaking assembly. Yeah, exactly.
I do my best work like traditionally, like at the point is, you know, you have like 90-minute sleep cycles.
Yep.
I have my most productive period, I think, when I'm just on the crest down towards literally falling asleep in my chair. So I think it's probably that, like this time in the morning. In fact, this is exactly, you know what, it's one of my sleep cycles hits almost exactly at midnight. So I'm actually probably about 10 minutes after the end of a fatigue point. So I'm probably coming back up.
Hey.
There you go.
I think my most productive time is fast becoming 3 a.m. I started just waking up at like 2:30 and just rising like a friggin' like a vampire out of my casket.
Just like directly straight up.
Upgrade.
Okay, so Usurper, what are you excited about next week in Cosmos?
This week I'm moving all my stuff to Akash. That's number one. Anything that's not in Akash is going to Akash. I really appreciate this.
Hold the phone.
That was a bit
great. What's going to Akash?
Anything that I have.
Like in terms of web hosting, or
yes, anything outside of, well, right now validators. I really need to look more at that because we run a pretty large colo structure, but we use some cloud services and things like that. But I haven't really got to that point about running nodes, but we run a tremendous number of non-validator nodes, right? And to be able to reduce the cost of that and be able to they are ephemeral right now. Those are things that have uptime but are not exactly necessary in terms of state right now, which I know is coming, but right. Web hosting and things like that.
Having been a user of Cosmos Omnibus,
yeah,
for regular nodes, it is very good. Even without, like, you know, if you're coming in from a Pokachoo snapshot or one of their maintained snapshots, I'm not sure how prune they are, how small they are, but man, it's you're up. You can point stuff to it, and you're off. You just want to, tune your resources so they don't get nuked when someone starts hitting them on the RPC port. But I think you'll have a very good time if you want to try and move some of your resource into Akash, and I'd be happy to like give you a bloody pointer on Omnibus, which is super easy to use anyway. Fun fact: I made the PR on that for the Juno edition when Juno first started, and Adam the libwasm, which wasn't working on Omnibus at the time. That's my contribution.
Delegate to King Notes.
Usurper,
yes.
If you're moving your stuff to Akash, and if you want to validate on Akash, if you're not on the active side, we'll do the delegation, because one of the requirements is, like, if you're running on Akash, if you're a validator, you get a higher chance of delegation. So talk to me.
All right, I like that.
If you do that,
I think away from all that, like we're all in the Cosmos, and we have a tremendous amount of positive energy towards projects that are going on. And I think the projects, to me personally, as somebody who runs a small business within the Cosmos, an independent validator, ones that make the most, that call to me the most, are extremely effective and utilitarian projects that use blockchain as a method of incentive. And that's kind of how I got involved in blockchain, and not so much just around the DeFi structure of things, but how do I build? It's impossible to build a future vision around a really grandiose structure without either an absolute shit ton of cash or a way to be able to incentivize tens or thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of people to be able to buy in that vision. And I think blockchain, and I think the Cosmos, especially with low gas fees and a low barrier of entry and everything else, is the right tool set to build a tremendous amount of incentivizing around specific ideas. And this is a great idea to build incentivizing around. And it's just a worthy cause of being able to do that. And so I didn't really know the history, and going all the way back to 2013. I think that's fascinating around how this vision, it wasn't a Cosmos-based vision, right? It was a vision around how to be able to solve a very complex and fairly scalable problem. And then really kind of fate brought you together with a tool set that allows you to get a partial of the way there. Right.
Yeah.
So anything to do to support that, man, that's awesome. Like that's something that's a worthwhile thing. So that's one thing this week. Otherwise, let's see. Boy, that was a lot. I think outside of that, we have no, I think that's it for me actually this week. That's a great goal for this week, and something I'm excited about making some changes to.
Nice. Schultzy?
Awesome.
I'm excited about the secret upgrade next week, and especially with the soft that's going to be joining us next week. More or less during the upgrade, I'm really curious as to how it's going to go down. Is he going to end up folding out because there's an upgrade to manage? Who knows? But I'm excited for one way or another.
It'll be that'll be, I think, mine and Blockpain's first secret network upgrade. So I love the names they come up with for those upgrades, by the way.
Yeah, no, they put some good effort into the marketing side of it for sure.
So I think that leaves us with me. I'm excited about like upgrading some security around my nodes. So we're moving entirely to TM-KMS as an interim measure until we're more comfortable with Horcrux and deploying Horcrux. So I'm a little bit reluctant on Horcrux at the moment from reading an issue that someone else had where they double signed. So making sure that we're outside of that narrative when we are ready to deploy Horcrux. But I think that TM-KMS is a good interim step to make sure that our nodes are completely key-free and that all our signing material is completely firewalled off and secure. So
TM-KMS is remote signer, right?
Sorry?
Is TM-KMS a remote signer?
Remote signer, yeah. So that's what I was saying. I think TM-KMS is actually a good fit for Cosmos Omnibus. Yeah. Because at the moment you pretty much have to keep your signing material on S3 storage the way it's set up, which is a little bit. It's probably I mean, it adds a vector that people could get to. It's just another thing to manage in terms of security, I suppose, if you're trying to run an actual validator. But like I was saying, the way Cosmos Omnibus is set up, you would have to rejigger some of the scripting and possibly. Well, actually, that's not entirely true because you can actually set environment variables for your config files. So it probably would then, in that case, be very easy. It'd be nice if you could create some automation to link the deployment address that you're assigned after you deploy to automatically update your signer. That'd be fun.
We've been looking at TM-KMS. I think we should use TM-KMS. It's amazing. Well,
I mean, really, it is already an option for anyone who wants to use Omnibus because of the environment variable configuration. So it's just another line. Well, it's two lines. One to turn off your local key, and then you just wouldn't add TM-KMS. Sorry, you just wouldn't add S3, and then point towards your allow your TM-KMS IP. So which kind of I think would So I think that'd work just fine. But just linking that on the TM-KMS side of things, I think in an automated way would be pretty handy.
Yeah, we should at least add some examples there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, that wraps it for me. Did you want to walk us out, Afraid? You haven't cut me off yet. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I've spent a few weeks kind of basically trolling you too aggressively, and I kind of feel bad for it. So.